everyone, this is Arabella from Arabella's Voice Studio, back with another podcast episode for Piano for the Vocalist. This time, I am joined by Adrian Avalos, our guest speaker for today, and I just have to say, I think he's going to bring such a wealth of knowledge to the table here. When I was preparing questions, I had to think through how to structure everything because Adrian has experience working in a music studio on a customer relations level, teaching in a music studio, doing those things both at once, and then working in a brewery and restaurant, booking artists on gigs, working with artists in various capacities. So, with that, I want to stop talking and let Adrian introduce himself and give us just a little bit more.
Hi, guys. My name is Adrian. I'm the current events coordinator over at Democracy Brewing in downtown Boston. I am I would say, music hobbyist, but a pretty serious one at that. Music's a huge part of who I am, and I try to intertwine things that I do with music, whether that be, functionally or just having an earbud in while I'm busy doing something else is always nice. So if you got any good music recs, send them my way.
If I don't have good enough music recs, then our listeners would definitely send some into you. So we'll keep you posted on that and vice versa. You let us know what you've been listening to as well. But right off the bat with that introduction, I have a question because you labeled yourself as a music hobbyist. And a lot of our listeners, and I think our students and teachers, struggle with the balance between being in music in a professional capacity and also keeping that hobbyist nature and love alive. How do you balance that?
For different people, there's probably different levels of where they want to be at when it comes to music. Obviously, people who might just, want to sing at karaoke parties or in the shower, to people who might want to maybe impress people a little bit more or do things like open mics or maybe the irregular gig with friends or something like that. All the way to obviously like working professional musicians, people that are getting paid to do gigs. And there's so many levels to it. And I think that when you're looking to balance music in your life, it just depends how far you want to take it. I think that the most important thing that has really helped me sort of stay inspired to continue playing and to continue practicing and to continue just working on that craft and building on that, hobby for me is knowledge, really. So that can come in the form of, maybe you find a favorite like podcaster that you listen to in the music world. Maybe you find your favorite online content creator who teaches things related to music. I know I follow tons of people on YouTube who do all different kinds of things that I'm interested in personally when it comes to music, like everything from analyzing video game scores to, you know, uh, people who just interview guitarists, So I find that having a source of knowledge somewhere that you can just pull from that is engaging, whether that be in an entertaining way, like something like a content creator or somebody like a teacher. Obviously, taking lessons is a really easy way to stay engaged because you have that not just that wealth of knowledge in front of you with the right teacher, but also that inspiration and tangibility of like having somebody to keep you accountable, basically. There's different ways to balance it. Again, kind of depends on how far you want to take it, but I think just finding a way to stay engaged, even passively, is a great way to just remind yourself to keep working on it and that it's there. And also being a little bit easy on yourself when you're not able to like, practice as much as you might want to or something like that because whether you're a working gigging professional musician or somebody who's just a little bit of a hobbyist, I think everybody hits those walls or has to overcome those sort of mental challenges of feeling like you're not doing enough. At least I know that's been a common theme for me over my time as a musician.
Absolutely. And I said it, I think, in the last podcast, if not the podcast before, and I will say it again. I teach lessons, but I also take lessons. And for me, that's a really important outlet. Yes, I want to learn more as a teacher, of course, to teach it, but also I have taken lessons and I just took one last week where I walked in the door and said, I don't want the focus to be on learning today. I just want to jam. And some of my best lessons were just jam sessions. And of course, you still learn from it because you're with another human. But having that, again, outlet to go to and just play is really important for me.
Yeah, I sort of liken that experience, to, like, just there's a lot you can learn in life just by, like, going outside and throwing a ball with somebody and just playing catch. It's like you're playing that musical game of catch where you're going back and forth with your phrases or, maybe showing somebody else, like, music you've been working on or what you've been practicing, and having that back and forth with another, human being is so important and, like, in any, place in that there's room for human development, I think.
I really like that, that musical game of catch. I haven't heard it described that way, but I really like that. I think I'm gonna steal that from you if that's okay. Uh,
Absolutely, please do.
so I noticed, and I don't know if this is on purpose, but in the industries you worked in outside of music studios, outside of music directly, they seem to be music adjacent or music parallel. Is that a conscious choice, or do you think that's just something that you've subconsciously done, but maybe had just the internal love for music?
It definitely, I would say, is a conscious choice. Well, it kinda depends, right? There was obviously working and teaching and stuff, I've done purposefully, but there's times where I didn't. I think even like 10 years ago, when I was living in Arizona, um, I was able to pick up students because I was actually working in the real estate investing space, and so I got to network with a lot of different people. I was in a band at the time, and people knew that about me, so I had some people approach me about like teaching their kids, for example. And so I was always able to keep music in my life through just like happenstance like that. So it's definitely been a thing where like if I have the musical opportunity in front of me, I definitely gravitate towards that. But it's been actually really great being able to, work in the industry purposefully because it's not always so easy to find a job in the industry or in a place um, in the industry where you I guess, feel really comfortable and are making, a good amount of money and stuff. So I've had the fortune of being able to like not get rich, but be able to survive off of money made working in that industry. Most of my life I've had to work like multiple jobs at a time. So that's obviously like an unfortunate thing that a lot of musicians have to deal with too, But even when I was at a studio, I still had to teach to sort of subsidize that. So, uh, yeah, I think I definitely gravitate towards, musical opportunities when they appear, but there's been times in my life where I just felt like I really needed to be around music so strongly and passionately that I will just look up on Indeed or whatever, music related jobs. And you'd be surprised what you find out there. It's always worth like taking a peruse every now and then if you are, in that space where you're looking for something musically inclined, I guess.
I take 3 key things from what you just said. One is, I think sometimes it's romanticized to be the, quote, "starving artist," but in reality, it's just not so fun, right? So, having those networking opportunities are just, oh, so important. That was the second takeaway of you don't have to live in that world of I'm an artist, so therefore I have to suffer for my art. You can network into opportunities that still keep you happy, but pay the bills. At least that's been my experience. I have to double back though on that word networking because I think that's been a qualification between all of these jobs that you've done. What do artists need to do to network to get gigs? Maybe you can even speak specifically to something that you value, like, what do you value when you look for, the next act?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say that networking is definitely super important. And there's better ways to network than others. It really comes down to you really got to know yourself. I think first of all, you got to know how you come off to people, and you can ask your friends about that. And you know, I'm sure if you have some good friends, they'll give you some honest answers. But I think it's really important just because there's different ways of approaching people and of marketing yourself. In some ways that are much more natural than others. I would say that in my experience as a booker and getting acts lined up, that will definitely take more or pay more attention to people who I feel are more passionate and personable. And I think those are two really important things because I want to be able to give people the opportunity, and I wish I could give every single person the opportunity to like perform and have the dignity of like an actual like paid gig, and really being able to have people be showcased, at least where I currently work, in a spot where you really are in front of a wide audience and a wide net variety as well. You know, our venue is in the heart of Boston, so we get all kinds of people, and so I have to sort of take into account, you know, who is, you know, going to be palatable for the widest range of people, essentially. That's not the end all be all of like who gets to, you know, get the gig. But I think that goes to my second thing, just being a personable in a way that's well, I could give you a little of an example. I every now and then will get people who send emails that are very obviously, you know, copy paste that they're just sending out to every single venue. And I'm sure that that works for a lot of people. Doesn't always immediately get my attention. Sometimes I'm like, this looks kind of great. And I might even listen to something and I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back to them later. And then it might get lost in my inbox or, you know, my attention might go elsewhere. And I found that the people that I really end up working with are the people who really have a more personalized and personable approach to the way that they reach out and are asking about, you know, making a gig inquiry. So I've had people show up in person. That's not always the best idea. It's always better if I think you make an appointment with somewhere you might be trying to make a gig. Because not everybody likes to just be surprised with a guest. But there's definitely ways of just like writing your emails and trying your best to, you know, not sound like it's just chat GPT with some links and some pictures or videos, which are always good and those things are great. But it's just trying to take the most personable, humble approach to it, while also having a sort of confidence that shows like, hey, I know I'm really good at what I do. I practice all the time, and I would really appreciate this opportunity. That sort of vibe, I think, and also people who, you know, follow up. I think that it's definitely a lot of work, and I acknowledge that on like the artist side to like find places and like scout for places that they might be able to play, to have to figure out who do I contact, because not that information isn't always like readily available on like a website or something. You know, who do I contact to even ask these questions, you know, and following up if people don't get back to you. Like every single one of those steps takes time and effort. And so it can be a little bit, I understand the allure of just getting like an email blast out to a bunch of venues all at once or something like that. But I think it really pays off when you're able to like take your time and sort of do your best to not just like, hey, I need a gig, but being like, hey, I would like to establish a relationship with your business. Like I'm a great musician and I'd love to not just play there once, but maybe, you know, a couple of times at least one time to like give me a shot. I don't know. I've been approached in different ways, and I always think that the people who want to not just play once, but just want to build a relationship, or that you can get butts through the door, I think is also really powerful as well. So I feel like that was a really long-winded answer to
No,
the question, but
I don't think so. I think that was great. I'm gonna make a statement here that I think maybe aligns with what you said partially, but maybe goes against part of it. So let's talk it through a little bit.
let's do it.
When people ask my advice, and granted, I will be forthcoming in that I don't it's not really what I do to go out into bars and gig in that way. I'm in the same industry, but slightly different, right? What you do as a studio and what you do as a teacher is gonna look and feel a little different. But when people ask for my advice, I always tell them, "Write a framework. Write that copy and paste email. but put in parentheses, look up something about the venue, add a personalization up top. And I think that sort of to me helps with the confident piece of you don't have to rewrite it every time in that like don't rewrite the script. You know who you are. Put it down on paper, be really confident in that, and then do the extra homework of looking up the venue, looking up the person who's booking it. And not only that, once you meet the person for the first time, write down something that stood out to you that's authentic so that you can email them back with something real. And to me, that's building on the scripts, like building a narrative that you already have, but it's still, to Adrian's point, showing that you care. And I think that's the big part that we're underlining here is there's so many acts in Boston and worldwide. What's going to make you different, in my opinion, isn't necessarily your music, the songs you're doing, your voice or piano playing, but it's going to be you as a person. That's my opinion. What do you think?
No, absolutely. It kind of I guess when I think about it is almost just like if you were applying for a job. It's like you can have a resume, and then you write like a cover letter just and it can even be the same script for the cover letter, but you just make those personal touches, right? And just show like, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I like this thing about your venue or this thing, or here's why I want to play there," basically. Then it shows that you're genuinely interested, and it makes me interested in you as a person. And I think that when you're also booking acts, you're thinking about what's this person gonna be like on stage, and having people that are, uh, real and authentic, like you said, and come off as that way, that'll make the audience gravitate towards them too, during their performance. So I think that's all super important and really good tools, is to be able to have, like, your elevator pitch, quote, unquote, but in that format where you can still get it to people, but it definitely pays to, like, again, taking your time to sort of do your best to build an authentic relationship versus just coming off as like, "Hey, I just wanna use your space to play a gig." Having that extra layer makes a huge difference.
So I think already here you're giving some green flags, you're giving red flags, and I would advise everyone to pause, write some of those stuff down because really good information here. Um, what are some courtesy things slightly away from working with the venue and the person booking you? But once you have the gig, are there courtesy items you look for to invite them back?
Absolutely. It and I don't know if I guess if it's the best word for it, but just being polite, having manners, and I guess empathizing with the people that you're working with, whether it be a sound person or just an events person who has you around. There's definitely a level of like, human understanding and empathy that goes both ways. And I guess what I mean by that is you want to be able to feel like this person did their best to be on their best behavior in your house? I don't know. That's probably not the best way to put it, but having some sort of, live music etiquette, like, whether that be helping with setup and tear down or loading or unloading, I can actually give my position as an example. While I'm not 100% sure what every other events person or sound person does when they have somebody and they're hosting them for a gig, I always try to make it a mission to make sure I'm helping with those things, whether it be loading or unloading. If the band is doing their own sound, is there anything I can do for you to be helpful? Just being a team player and making it so that everybody's job is a little bit easier. Maybe the drummer needs some help with moving a couple stuff or getting stuff set up, and having the courtesy to just ask, or the other way around, I guess. If I'm doing something like I'm tearing down at the end of a gig or something, it's always nice if a band is offering to like help wrap up some cables really quick or move a speaker or something like that. So I think it's really just comes down to just being courteous, being kind, and trying to be a team player who's there to make everybody's life a little bit easier. And I'm sure as like, bandmates, if you are a person that's in a band, that's already something that I think is good practice. I don't think it's like, well, you're a drummer, so the drums are your problem, or you're a guitarist, so you have to lug the amp around on your own. I think it's just looking for little ways to help each other out. And when I see bands interacting with each other that way, that's how I know that they're a real band. In my opinion, they're people who care about each other, and that usually shows in the way that they play and then the way that they perform together. And so I want to work with those people again. I want to work with the team players that are looking for something to do until the job is done, because the weight is not always distributed equally, and it's always a good thing when people are courteous. And there's other ways of showing that too, not just with like physical or manual labor sort of things, but even when it comes to doing things like sound check, or even just showing up to a gig on time or early. And that just comes to, again, respecting other people, respecting their time, and showing them that. So respect, courtesy, and being a team player. I think those are all really, really key things that make me go like, oh wow, like this person's great. I really want to work with them again. They're so nice.
Absolutely. So, question going off of that. Speaking of courtesy, but a different kind of courtesy. Courtesy reposting or content shares. Two questions coming off of that. One, when you book an artist, are you looking, you were talking about following before, can they get people in the door? Right? At the end of the day, these bars and these pubs, they're businesses, so they want you to bring people in the door. So that makes sense. Are you looking for things like websites? What content do they need to have out there? And do you want them or not want them to reshare yours?
Well, I think that answer definitely differs based on like the establishment. Obviously if I were TD Gardens, Booker, it'd be a different answer. But I think personally, it sort of comes back to a little bit of what I mentioned in terms of like definitely a following is a big thing to look for. Um, but if you can get, you know, 20 to 30 people through the door, that's like a success to me. That's not like that. You don't need to fill up a stadium or anything, or have like, 20,000 followers. It really comes down to being somebody who is, again, somebody that I want to work with and has those some of the qualities that I mentioned earlier. I think that when it comes to social media, it's also at least something I've learned is like different organizations might also have different boundaries or guidelines, where maybe they don't want to have, as many posters filling up their feed as they do like reels or live videos and stuff. For obvious reasons and like respectable reasons. I know that personally, at least leading up to a gig, I love like marketing as best as I can. And I want people to know not just who we're promoting, but it's also beneficial, at least in our terms, just for people to know that we are doing live music, period. I think that it's really powerful when, you see like your favorite venue, like, oh, like they're doing this thing every week, or, every other week. I really want to go to it, whether it's live music or some other type of event. And when it comes to like specific artists, I've never really shied away from, people tagging us and stuff. I am pretty open about like, hey, I'm probably gonna uncollaborate with you maybe like a couple weeks after the gig, so I can free up my timeline a little bit. And people are usually, perfectly okay with that. So you can still keep us tagged and all that, but there's definitely a level of like it's a give and take a little bit. And I think it's really important that you establish those boundaries sort of as you're going into that, relationship, which I feel like I'm talking about like relationships at this time. But yeah, no, boundaries are super important in both of those kinds of relationships. And it is important to communicate those, because I, would hate to like have somebody do a collaboration post or something, and then I, not untag us, but remove it from our feed or whatever. And then they get like upset about it, which for some reason, which I've never had happen. But it is probably because I've communicated to people that like, "Hey, we're probably gonna do that." I think it's also important to understand when people do that, so, um, it goes the other way, right? So, I think that when it comes to social media, it's a little bit different for everybody, but I've never shied away from wanting to just if I could take a bullhorn to, like, a roof in downtown Boston and scream it from the rooftops that, like, so and so is playing at our in our space on Thursday, then I would.
You
And
heard
for the
it here
few years
first. The next advertising, promotional reel will be Adrian screaming with a bullhorn that someone's playing.
Exactly. Yeah, I love promoting people, and I love getting eyes on them, and I know that maybe not our entire following's gonna follow whoever we're promoting, but if we can get 1 or 2 more people their way, like, you know, I feel like it's worth it.
Sure. I would like to wrap us up in saying one thing, and that is something I tell my students and teachers too when they come in. It only takes one video, it only takes one booking, it only takes one anything to get in the door, and then you build from there. That's my last piece of advice, if I could leave it there. Adrian, is there you've given so much great advice, but is there any last thing that you would wrap everything up with and leave our listeners with something super practical to think about?
In the same way that being a great musician, a great writer, or a great performer even takes a lot of time and practice and learning. The same goes for getting gigs, getting your foot through that door. And I think it's important to start where you can and keep trying. Maybe you did email that one venue and they didn't get back to you. Try again, a week or 2 later, find a different approach. Um, Go to that first open mic if you can. Get videos of yourself that you can maybe send in that next email to that next venue. It takes time learning how to market yourself and learning the things about you that are the most marketable things. But I think that if you're just true to yourself and you do your best to show that genuineness in your own marketing of yourself, whether that be in emails, videos, or while you're on stage marketing yourself to strangers who might be at your show or the venue you're at. Like, I think it's just, it takes practice, it takes time, and just explore. Don't be afraid to experiment and just have fun with it as you go.
Absolutely. And if I could just end on a personal note to our listeners, I was really lucky to have a very strong network even before we had a physical place to have our studio. We were in like 6 different locations at one point, teaching from rental spaces, teaching from other music teachers' spaces that were just kind enough to rent out to us. So that networking piece is huge for me personally. And part of the reason that Adrian and I can connect today is because I had those opportunities. And just a big thank you to Adrian, as he was one of those people who were coordinating for us while we were in those spaces. So, those last minute cancellations, the last minute videos that we needed to get up to market ourselves, all the stuff that made us get from point A to point B, so important, and a big thank you to you for helping coordinate a lot of that and continuing to support us by coming on and doing these videos, these chats with us, and putting out great resources for our listeners.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. It's been a big blessing to have gotten to meet you and known you and, to continue to work with you in different ways, over the years. So I definitely appreciate you and your time, and thank you for having me today and thinking about me. It really means a lot.
All right, everyone. We will be back, of course, with other episodes. Again, a thank you to Adrian and more to come.